In our headlines on this Tuesday, April 8th, here in South Korea, June 3rd is confirmed as the date of the early presidential election, and a number of political figures earlier today formally announced their intentions to run in the race. Meanwhile, a Korean trade delegation led by Minister Chung In-kyung has departed for the US with intentions to address the 25% American tariff on Korean imports. And for the 22nd month in a row, South Korea's current account remained in the black with a surplus of over $7.1 billion in February, bolstered by ICT exports. Acting President Han Duck-soo has officially announced June 3rd as Election Day. Our correspondent Oh Seong covers this announcement and the protocols ahead for the presidential race.
South Korea will hold an early presidential election on June 3rd, 2 months after the removal of former President Yoon Suk-yeol. In a meeting chaired by Acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, Cabinet Ministers on Tuesday confirmed the date of the early election and declared it a temporary holiday to encourage voter turnout. The decision comes 4 days after the Constitutional Court upheld former President Yoon's impeachment over his martial law declaration last year, effectively ousting the nation's 20th president. Under the Constitution, a snap election must be held within 60 days of a presidential vacancy, with a date set within 10 days. While June 3rd is the last possible day to hold the election, it's considered a necessary period of time for sufficient campaigning and preparation. In 2017, following former President Park Geun-hye's removal from office, an election was held 60 days later.
We considered the time required to smoothly execute legally mandated tasks for election management and preparation time for each political party. To ensure citizens can exercise their precious right to vote, we have designated Election Day as a temporary public holiday.
The National Election Commission Tuesday promptly confirmed the election schedule. It will accept candidate registrations on May 10th and 11th, before official campaigning starts on the 12th until June 2nd, the day before the vote. Televised interviews and debates hosted by electoral authorities will be held during this time. Overseas Koreans must register to vote 40 days before Election Day, and ballots for them will open from May 20th to 25th at embassies and consulates around the world. Early voting will be held the weekend before, on May 29th and 30th, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. On the official election day, voting hours will be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. To support a fair and transparent electoral process, the Interior Ministry will operate a fair election support situation room through Election Day. A nationwide mock exam for the November college entrance test has been rescheduled to a day later on June 4th. In an early election, the winner must immediately assume presidential duties without a transmission committee. In the 2017 presidential race, then President-elect Moon Jae-in took office straight after his victory was confirmed on May 10th, the day after ballots were cast. Until the leadership vacuum is filled, Acting President Han told cabinet members they must devote themselves fully to ensuring the safety of the people, restoring livelihoods, and responding to the ongoing trade war triggered by the United States. Oh Seong, Arirang News.
And now that the date has been declared, a number of key political figures have formally announced their intentions to join the race to the top office. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
With the next presidential election officially set for June 3rd, eyes are now on who's going to be running in this relatively short election season. The Democratic Party of Korea, which holds the majority on the floor, does have a clear frontrunner, though he's yet to announce his official candidacy. The party's chair, Lee Jae-myung, who lost the last presidential election to Yoon Suk-yeol by just 0.7 points, is expected to resign from the party's leadership as early as Wednesday to make a bid for the presidency. Despite this, there are other DP politicians not from East faction who are going to compete for the candidacy. Kim Do-kwan, former Minister of Interior and Governor of Gyeongsang-namdo Province, as well as a lawmaker, said he will run. Kim Dong-yeon, current Governor of Gyeonggi-do Province, announced that he will formally declare on Wednesday as he leaves for the state of Michigan in the U.S. to deal with tariff issues. As for the People Power Party, there is no frontrunner like its rival, and the primary is expected to have around 10 candidates. First up is lawmaker An Cheol-soo, who held an official press conference on Tuesday declaring his fourth run for presidency. Labor Minister Kim Moon-soo resigned from his post on Tuesday and said he will officially start his campaign on Wednesday. Former PPP chair Han Dong-hoon said his camp will kick off on Thursday, while Daegu Mayor Hong Jun-pyo's camp said his official announcement will be on the 14th of April. The two most watched so far are Kim Moon-soo and Han Dong-hoon. Kim famously refused to apologize for the martial law declaration at the National Assembly when all other cabinet members stood up. Han was the chair of PPP and despite being from the party, openly supported the impeachment of President Yoon. Meanwhile, third-party candidates are expected to announce their bids as well. It began with Lee Jun-seok, the new Reform Party chair who was formerly the chair of the PPP, registering as a preliminary candidate already. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, acting President Han Duck-soo has appointed Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk to the Constitutional Court after months of standoff with opposition lawmakers. The appointment was announced during a cabinet meeting on this Tuesday, along with the nominations of two other justices to succeed the two members of the Constitutional Court poised to retire next Friday. The two nominees include Lee Wan-gyu, Director of the Ministry of Government Legislation, and Ham Sang-hun, Chief Judge of the Seoul High Court. And it is the nomination of these two justices that the opposition Democratic Party is taking issue with, asserting that Han has no authority to announce such appointments, given his role as the acting president of an impeached administration. In a similar vein, National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik said the Parliament would refuse confirmation hearings for these two candidates. On the global trade front, the U.S. and China appear engaged in an unsettling game of tit-for-tat over tariffs, with Beijing vowing not to back down in response to a fresh warning of an additional 50% tariff on Chinese products as pledged in a social post by Mr. Trump himself. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun has the latest.
China is threatening further retaliation against the United States should they impose the additional tariff promised by U.S. President Donald Trump. According to the Wall Street Journal, a statement from Beijing's Ministry of Commerce on Tuesday said that it would take countermeasures to safeguard its own rights and interests in response to Trump's social media post, which said Washington could impose an additional 50% tariff on Beijing. The statement called the move a mistake on top of a mistake. Previously, China announced a 34% tariff on American goods in response to U.S. levies, which in turn led to Trump's threat of additional tariffs unless Beijing withdraws these retaliatory tariffs. The escalation of the trade war between the two countries brings the total rate to be levied on Chinese imports to 104%. This is expected to have a staggering impact as China was the second largest trading partner with the U.S. last year. Trump also warns that unless Beijing accepts his demands, its negotiations with the U.S. will come to a standstill. Meanwhile, negotiations with other countries are due to begin immediately. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said more than 50 countries reached out for talks, while Trump said leaders from Asia and Europe called him over the weekend, as well as Japan's Prime Minister on Monday.
We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals, and in certain cases they're going to be paying substantial tariffs. There'll be fair deals.
This marks a shift from earlier statements, which stated that there would be no negotiations for the time being. During interviews with various media outlets, White House officials said that such deals would need to be really great for American manufacturing and farmers, and countries would need to do more than just lowering their tariffs for relief. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And U.S. President Donald Trump has brushed aside an offer by the European Union of zero-for-zero tariffs for industrial goods. And addressing members of the media at the White House, he claimed the offer was not enough. Our Lee Seung-jae covers that offer and more.
After the announcement of sweeping reciprocal tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump last week, countries are looking to negotiate a deal before April 9th, when the tariffs go into effect. The European Union, in the hopes of striking a deal with the U.S., said Monday that it has offered zero-for-zero tariffs for industrial goods. The announcement was made by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who stressed that such deals were done successfully with other countries in the past. The US and the EU were close to removing tariffs on all industrial goods a decade ago during the transatlantic trade and investment partnership talks, but this was ultimately scrapped by Trump in his first term. In response to Trump's automobile tariffs, the UK government said Monday it would relax electric vehicle sales targets in order to help its domestic auto industry. The ban on selling new gas and diesel cars will still come into effect in 2030, but automakers will now have more flexibility on annual targets. Currently, 28% of new cars sold in the UK in 2025 must be electric, as the target will rise annually until 2030. However, automakers will be given more freedom on how they meet their annual targets. This means that if they don't sell enough EVs in 1 year, they can make it up by selling more next year. Also, a penalty of £15,000 or $19,000 per vehicle sold that does not meet the latest emissions standards will be cut to just over $15,000. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba held phone talks on Monday, where the Japanese leader voiced his disappointment over the tariffs. Ishiba told Trump that Japan has been the biggest investor in the U.S. for 5 straight years, and that his tariff policies could hurt Japanese companies and their investments. During the 25-minute call, the two leaders also agreed on constructive dialogue on the matter, with Ishiba sending a team to negotiate with the U.S. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, a South Korean trade delegation led by Minister Chung In-kyo has departed for the U.S. with intentions to address the 25% American tariff on Korean imports. Our Park Jun-han has details.
Trade Minister Chung In-kyo traveled to Washington on Tuesday to discuss tariffs imposed by the U.S. on South Korean products. Chung will meet U.S. trade representatives in Washington and emphasized that the 25% tariffs affecting steel and automobiles would be the subject of talks during his visit.
So we are trying to use multiple channels to solve the tariffs issue with the United States and to come up with a trade policy outcome that will maximize South Korea's national interests.
This is the first visit by a South Korean government official to the U.S. since Trump announced his detailed reciprocal tariffs plan on April 2nd. Regarding South Korea's stance on U.S. trade policy, Chung said the cabinet has been discussing the possibility of increasing imports from the United States, such as Alaskan liquefied natural gas. The move is aimed at addressing the trade imbalance that Trump has repeatedly raised.
I think as long as Korea will be willing to provide some concessions to the United States, that we could reduce the tariff rate from 25% to 15% or 10%.
At a ministerial meeting on economic affairs, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok outlined a plan to create a supplementary budget to combat issues related to trade and AI. Choi said the government is planning to spend 3 to 4 trillion won, about $2.04 to $2.72 billion, to respond to rapid changes in the trade environment and enhance AI competitiveness. Choi also called on the National Assembly to swiftly approve the budget, emphasizing the need to seize this critical window to save South Korea's industries and businesses. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
And as U.S. tariffs rattle global financial markets, the South Korean currency lost substantial ground against the U.S. dollar, weakening to 1,473 won at one point during trade on this Tuesday afternoon. Now, this is the won's weakest level against the greenback since the global financial crisis. At an emergency meeting of the country's top economic officials convened by Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, authorities acknowledged the vulnerability of the local financial market to external risk factors and agreed to remain vigilant in anticipation of further fluctuations. On a bright note now, for the 22nd month in a row, Korea's current account remained in the black with a surplus of over $7.1 billion in February. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin covers the latest findings.
South Korea's current account stayed in the black for the 22nd month in a row in February. According to data from the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, the country logged a near $7.2 billion current account surplus in the second month of the year. This also marks a sharp increase from January's surplus when there were fewer working days on account of the Lunar New Year holiday. It comes as the goods balance, which tracks exports and imports of products and accounts for the largest portion of the current account, recorded an $8.2 billion surplus, also marking a significant increase from the previous month. This extends the surplus streak for the goods balance to 23 consecutive months. Exports rose 3.6% compared to the previous year on strong demand for computers, pharmaceuticals, cars, and IT equipment. But outbound shipments of chips dropped compared to the previous year, a decline recorded for the first time since October 2023.
Exports of lower-value DDR4 memory chips fell slightly in February due to price drops, but picked up again in March despite competition from China. Still, it's something we'll need to watch closely.
The size of the country's service balance once again remained in the red, with a deficit deepening compared to the previous month. This was mostly due to the larger shortfall in the intellectual property account from increased payments by domestic firms to overseas companies for R&D-related royalty fees. When asked about when the impact of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs will be felt, the same official said the current account surplus will likely continue through March, with effects starting to show in April, but that while sectors like autos and auto parts will be affected, the impact is expected to be gradual, not immediate. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
And in the corporate arena, Samsung Electronics posted what pundits are calling a resilient first quarter profit on the back of strong demand of semiconductors and smartphones. Our Shin Se-byuk has more.
Samsung Electronics, in its earnings guidance on Tuesday, estimated a first quarter operating profit of 6.6 trillion Korean won, or roughly $4.5 billion. The figure beats market expectations of around $3.5 billion, thanks to strong sales of the tech giant's latest flagship smartphones, despite being down 0.15% from a year earlier. The market had projected weaker earnings due to delayed shipments of its 5th-gen HBM chips and falling memory prices, but brisk sales of the Galaxy S25, launched in February, pushed results well above forecasts. Stronger than expected DRAM shipments also contributed to the upbeat performance. Revenue rose nearly 10% on year to 79 trillion won, or around $54 billion, close to the all-time high of 79.1 trillion won posted in the third quarter of last year. Samsung did not disclose earnings by business division this time. However, market watchers estimate the MX division, which oversees smartphones, posted an operating profit of over $2.7 billion. The Device Solutions division, responsible for semiconductors, is projected to have logged an operating profit of around $681 million. With memory chip prices on the rise, expectations are growing for Samsung's performance in the coming quarters. But an expert warns that uncertainties remain.
Because of the tariff and because of the uncertainty and because of the slowing down of American economy, I think performances for the second quarter would not be as dramatic as first quarter, and possibly significantly lower than the first quarter.
The company's final earnings report will be released later this month. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
The Foreign Ministry here has lodged an official complaint against Japan's false claim over South Korea's Dokdo Island. The protest follows Japan laying claim to Dokdo in its diplomatic Blue Book released on this Tuesday. In response, the Foreign Ministry called in Daisuke Mibae, deputy head of mission at the Japanese embassy here in Seoul, to share its displeasure. In a separate statement, the ministry also stressed that Dokdo is South Korean territory, historically, geographically, and under international law, and that the government here would respond firmly to any false claim over Dokdo. Meanwhile, Korea will provide an additional $2 million worth of urgent relief items to Myanmar to aid its recovery after the recent deadly earthquake there. According to the Foreign Ministry here earlier today, the items will include 500 camping tents for the displaced, 4,000 water bottles and 80,000 blankets. This follows Seoul's initial $2 million worth of humanitarian assistance sent last week through the International Committee of the Red Cross. More than 10 days have passed since the massive quake, and as of this Tuesday, the death toll stands at around 3,600.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened at the White House to address the wide range of issues, including the Gaza conflict and Iran's nuclear ambitions. During their meeting on Monday at the Oval Office, Trump announced the initiation of direct talks with Iran over its nuclear program, with high-level discussions scheduled to begin on Saturday. Netanyahu expressed conditional support for the diplomatic efforts, stating that preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear capabilities through diplomatic means would be favorable. The leaders also discussed the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Netanyahu highlighted Israel's commitment to securing the release of hostages held by Hamas and mentioned its ongoing military operations aimed at achieving this objective. The U.S. president once again expressed his desire for the U.S. to take over the Gaza Strip, saying that it would be a good thing. In the Middle East, a Palestinian-American teenager was fatally shot by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. On Sunday evening local time, a 14-year-old U.S. citizen from New Jersey was shot and killed near the town of Tumus Aya, northeast of Ramallah. According to the Israel Defense Forces, soldiers identified 3 individuals throwing rocks at civilian vehicles on a nearby highway. The IDF said its soldiers opened fire during a counterterrorism operation in the area after spotting 3 terrorist individuals who were throwing rocks at the highway. The mayor of Tumus Aya said 3 teenagers were shot on this day, resulting in 1 death and injuries to 2 others. The Palestinian Ministry of Health called the shooting an extrajudicial killing. India's northern regions, including the capital Delhi, are experiencing an unseasonal heat wave, with temperatures soaring to unprecedented levels for early April. On Monday, Delhi recorded a maximum temperature of over 40 degrees Celsius, marking the highest of the season and exceeding the average temperature for this time of year by about 5 degrees. The India Meteorological Department has issued heatwave alerts for several northern and central states, forecasting temperatures to reach up to 42 degrees Celsius in the coming days. Authorities are advising residents to avoid heat exposure, stay hydrated, and wear lightweight clothing. Finally, in England, in the run-up to Easter, chocolate maker Cadbury has unveiled what it claims to be the world's largest creme egg. The giant chocolate egg was unveiled on Monday local time at Cadbury World in Birmingham. It's about 90 centimeters high and weighs 45 kilograms, which is as much as a newborn horse. The egg took 2 chocolatiers 2.5 days to complete. It features the classic creme egg design with its signature purple, gold, and red foil wrapper. The creation will be on display in Cadbury World's chocolate making zone until April 27th. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
Warm spring weather continues across the country today. Seoul rose up to 19 degrees Celsius, and Yangsan in Gyeongsang-namdo province was as warm as 25 degrees Celsius today. It will stay warm tomorrow nationwide, with Seoul rising up to 18 degrees, but the daily temperature range will also stay wide. Meanwhile, more regions are suffering from dry weather. Dry weather advisories are in effect in some parts of Gyeongsang-do provinces, southern parts of Chungcheongbuk-do province, eastern parts of Jeollado provinces, and the mountainous areas of Jeju Island. In addition, strong winds of more than 50 meters per second are blowing throughout the country. Extra caution is necessary. Tomorrow, Gwangju and Daegu will start off at 7 degrees, Busan and Jeju at 10 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 21 degrees in Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju. Rain will begin in the western parts of the country tomorrow afternoon and will spread across the country at night. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session. Do stay with us and thank you for now.